This is Metabolic Radio, the podcast dedicated to keeping you informed when it comes to everything fitness. My name is Taylor Empey, and with the help of my co-host Shane Pace, we aim to expose the truths about the health and fitness industry. The information and suggestions given in this podcast should not be considered as clinical or medical advice. Consult with a physician before implementing any information provided on this podcast. Shane. Hey, Shane.
What?
It's Q&A time.
Wow. Okie dokie.
It's Q&A. So,
Hokey smoky.
questions and answers from listeners like you. Support for Metabolic Radio is provided by listeners like you.
We should actually be doing a fundraiser right now.
We probably should.
It's all right. Keep going.
So, for today's Q&A,
I'll say that really quiet. So
we're going to start with...
Subliminal.
Shh. We're going to start with Tammy, who wants to know...
Hi, Tammy.
Hi, how are you, by the way? Things going well? Good.
Hey, yeah, there you go. Leave the break in there.
What?
Did we not cover this?
No, we didn't cover this.
I thought we did.
Nope. This is a follow-up question, I believe, to what Tammy asked a week or two ago about wondering whether she's going to start a ketogenic diet or not, which we did talk about that given her individual circumstances, she could have gone down a lot of different paths using like intermittent fasting.
Yeah, so this is after that.
She could do keto, she could not, she could do carb cycling, lots of different cool stuff. So she has decided she wanted to try a ketogenic diet. So she says, how do I build muscle while burning fat on a ketogenic diet? She didn't say that exactly. That's kind of what I summed it up as. But basically she says, I started a keto diet to shed a little more body fat. However, I still want to increase my muscle mass. What would you suggest to keep this balance moving forward? Carb cycling at some point? Which, like we talked about, could be an option. So, I'll say a little bit and then Shane can delve more into this. Pretty much, when you're talking about calories...
Oh my gosh! And I wanted to talk about it again, so that's that.
Okay, not even calories, okay? When you're not even talking about calories, but if you want to gain weight, right? Whether that's muscle mass or body fat tissue, if you just want to gain some weight, you need to be consuming enough that your body wants to actually store. So people would say a surplus, right? So you need to be consuming more than you're burning, and that's a basic law of thermodynamics. So technically you should be in a caloric surplus, but that's going to be an estimation, as we've had arguments about that in the past. So you need to estimate what excess calories are going to be for you, and put yourself just slightly over that. Now, if you're trying to gain muscle, you need to have enough available protein in your diet so that you can have substantial amino acids available in your body. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go to necessarily like an excessive protein intake like we've talked about in the forum. I think we've specifically talked to you about your individual protein intake. So if you estimate somewhere between a minimum of 0.7 grams per pound that you weigh, but probably leaning a little bit more towards a higher end of like 1 gram per pound approximately on the protein, research will show that that's going to help with more muscle development. Now you're still going to need to fuel that muscle, because if you're in whether you're in ketosis or if you're in even if you're in carb burning for energy, protein's not going to be used as an energy source unless you have excess of it. So it's going to be used as a building material. So you need enough of that building material.
Well, let's go into a little deeper on that for 2 seconds.
Okay.
So proteins won't even be used as an energy source. If you have another energy source anyway, it'll probably be just kicked out of your system.
If they're consuming to excess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It basically uses that not as a last resort, but it's not one of its first choices.
Yeah. No, it is its last choice. So as long as you're staying in that range of 0.7 grams to 1.2 grams per pound in terms of your daily protein intake, then you shouldn't be consuming to excess on the protein. And that should give you a substantial amount of amino acids to be able to build. Now, you do want a good diversity of those amino acids, so make sure you're not just relying on like a protein powder supplement. Just incorporate more diverse protein sources in your diet. That will give you the available amino acids that you need to build. Now, as for actually, fueling that, you need to look at carbohydrates or fats. Now, if you're experimenting with ketogenic and bulking, or essentially building muscle fiber, which I say bulking, but when we're talking about bulking for women, that takes a long time for you to ever get very large and bulky, and that for some people that's just not even a genetic possibility. So don't worry about building too much muscle. Which it doesn't sound like she's that worried about building, because she's wanting to focus on building more muscle. But just remember, it's going to take some time for you to do that. So you're going to have to be consuming the right amount of food in order to continue to send that building signal, so that you're not under consuming for your goal of building muscle. Now, in terms of fueling her body for building muscle in a ketogenic state, why don't you talk about that, since you've done more research on it?
You can fill in what you're going to do, and I'm going to talk about a few things.
That's pretty much where I want to hand it off to you, actually.
Okay,
so just we have proteins as the building block material for the tissue, but she needs fuel.
No, right,
and she's in a ketotic state, essentially. So how does she build muscle in a ketotic state?
So here's what I was going to say anyway. You don't have a real catabolic reaction unless you are either putting your body under extreme stresses, which causes your body to break down because of stress. It's something that will actually affect you in negative
muscle catabolism.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll affect you in a negative way, so you don't have to necessarily worry about that as greatly, because you are putting yourself under stress when you're working out, and that's a building block. It's a kind of stress, so that's, unless you're going through massive. If you had let's say a huge psychological issue happen, like I don't know, a family member, friend dies or something like that, that'll cause something that can potentially cause your body to go into a catabolic reaction that way. That's one of the things that's an issue. Overdoing it will cause that kind of reaction because of excessive stress. So that's another one. But I'm gonna step back in on an episode that we just aired on Wednesday and talk about calories. So here's another reason why I have massive issues with calories. Okay, foods, and yes, it's his fault because he brought up shit. Foods are used as building blocks for your body. Okay, that's something completely unrelated to calories. So when they take and they use the things that are coming in, like amino acids, to build your muscles, because amino acids / proteins are the building blocks for your body. So if you have enough proteins going in with enough energy source going in, which would be your fats, then you will build muscle. What will happen is when you go into ketosis and it runs correctly, your body will run on ketones, which means that your fat cells will kick out it will go to a ketosis-based state, which will cause your body to burn fat. Okay, so if you have the right balance of amino acids, like I said, / proteins, because it's got to be complete proteins for the body to use them correctly, then your body will be able to build muscle while technically speaking burning fats. Okay.
Yeah, that is a possibility. And just let's clarify, she probably knows this, but some other listeners may not. Amino acids make up protein. So they're essentially the same thing. They're just, amino acids are incomplete. A protein is a chain of a specific amount and combination of different amino acids.
Correct.
And amino acids by themselves are the broken down form of protein. So it's not like we're talking about two different things. We're talking about one thing that is either in a combined or broken down state.
Thus the reason why I was doing the slash. But
yeah.
The certain aminos will do certain things for you, but it's not. Again, if you do it on a dietary basis and you keep your fats high and your proteins at a higher level than the average person, so you're sitting at 40%, 35% to 30% proteins, you shouldn't have that breakdown of muscle. Because you'll have the building blocks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that sums it up perfectly.
I'm trying to think out what was the question you asked me. Since I got
how do you build muscle in a ketogenic diet? Because when a ketogenic diet, you're using fat as the fuel source,
right.
And your pretty much carbohydrate intake is borderline non-existent,
right?
And so you can't use glucose as carbohydrates. Glucose as energy source to actually fuel your body. The protein are the building blocks, and the fat is your fuel source in a ketogenic diet.
Right, and we should cover this really briefly. We've talked about it before, but I think we need to talk about it because it's a more detailed thing on this. So what will happen if you don't have enough fats in your diet and you're eating higher levels of protein, which is what some people believe a ketogenic diet is, it goes into something called gluconeogenesis, which means that it uses a protein and it converts it into glucose. And so you're technically running off of glucose, though it's based off of a protein reaction.
But, so what's happening is whether you're consuming excess protein or whether it's breaking down muscle protein.
Exactly right.
It stops using it as a building block for muscle tissue, and it starts breaking it down for an actual energy source.
Right.
And it doesn't net. It's not an efficient process. It doesn't net very much energy for you. So that's why a lot of people, when they do high protein and low carb, low fat diets, they tend to have that brain fog, the grogginess. They don't have as much energy. Sometimes that type of nutritional intake can be indicative of paleo, but it depends on how you do it. If you're doing paleo with high fats, then it's ketogenic.
Right. Paleo I like personally quite a bit. I've never run a true paleo diet, but it leans towards a low carb is what I would call it. I wouldn't call it a true
whether you choose for it to become high protein or high fat is really dependent on how you eat.
Yeah, agreed.
It could be both.
The thing with paleo that's different than a ketogenic diet is paleo it uses more fruits and vegetables than a true ketogenic diet does.
Yeah.
And so I'm a believer that that vegetables are a very good source for your body, that you should actually do it. That's why I'm a believer that ketogenic diets work pretty well for losing weight, but I believe vegetables are a very good source of different things that your body requires. So
yeah, you don't even really have to believe in that. That's just kind of a fact.
I do need to believe in that. If I don't believe in that, it makes it a known fact.
So yeah, essentially keep yourself consuming the right amount of food in order to, I guess, move the scale, but focus on making sure that you're getting enough protein and taking enough fuel source to fuel that process. But look at are you visually putting on muscle? Because you can actually, in this where we talked about, you can actually burn fats simultaneously potentially while building muscle. The scale may not move.
No, there's been proof of that actually.
Oh yeah, there's a few different ways that you can actually burn fat and build muscle. We should do an episode on that. Mm-hmm. This is one of those ways where you can actually have the scale not move, but you're actually changing your body composition, increasing your lean mass and decreasing your body fat mass. But if the scale moves, that would be indicative of positive energy balance, so that you would know that the calorie consumption is adequate or potentially excessive. So just kind of keep those things in mind, and also adjust your workout program accordingly to focus on strength and muscle building. So keep it in the high volume, not too much though, and lower rep ranges.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
For the right fast twitch muscle response.
It'll give you a higher, and we're going to do an episode on that sooner than later too. I hope we do that in the next week or two. We put one out on muscle fibers, but volume's the question. So it depends on how you use your volume. But yeah, anyway, I don't want to go into that. That really doesn't have a lot to do with your question. It does, but it doesn't. You're kind of dialed in on your plan. I mean, you may need to do some tweaks. We've talked about that before, as far as lifting. So I'm not as worried about that necessarily. But as long as you put your diet in line, and you keep doing some basic tweaks just to make it so that you get the individual reactions you want from your workout plan, then I think you'll be all right.
And to answer her last question, I would just say carb cycling is not necessary at this point because that'll take you out of ketosis. So experiment with one thing at a time. And, it'll take you in and out.
Yes.
But
it depends on how you do it.
I would only have her change one factor at a time.
I agree with that. We've talked about, have we talked about that on the show?
What carb cycling is?
Not carb
or one
cycling,
factor at a time.
One factor at a time. Because I know we did.
I think we've kind of hinted at it, but
we might have with Casey. I think we talked about it with Casey, actually, when we talked about it. But that being said, okay, so what he's talking about is isolating it so you can actually tell
if something's making the right difference for you.
Because you see the reaction. So when you're doing a kind of pseudoscience concept and you're doing a test or a trial on yourself, you have to break it down to one variable. If one variable changes and it changes the nature of the reaction, then you know that one variable is the cause. If you do 4 or 5 variables at the same time, you don't know which variable is what caused it. That's what his point is. I'll say this about carb cycling. Okay, carb cycling's okay if you do it on the weekend or something like that and you isolate it. You can't cycle. You can't do a true carb cycle and do it during a day. You've got to plan for it and isolate it in your week. There's no real need to do that, and the problem, and this is what Taylor's point is, the problem with doing that is you won't be able to have a true conversion to a ketosis type state, and your body will still want to run on glucose more so. Like I said before, I'm a believer that you can use carbs in conjunction and still have a ketogenic state. That being said, if you're going to try doing a ketogenic diet, I wouldn't carb cycle for that reason. It's because you want to actually test it for what he said again so that you can isolate, if that makes sense.
Cool. Next question is from Corin, and she says, I wanted to know what your take is on real sugar and artificial sweeteners. Which do you think is the best option? And so...
That's hands down.
Yeah, so it's kind of... Let's just be clear that we're not trying to demonize any foods necessarily, but...
Well, let me say this really fast.
Okay.
Wow. One of those moments, huh? I want to define the idea of real sugar to artificial sweeteners. So artificial sweeteners, because I am going to demonize it to an extent, I'm going to call those that are actually not nutrients based, okay, or not natural sources. I'm going to refer to real sugar as anything that's naturally based. So that's going to make a variant in what we're going to talk about, because if we do it and we isolate this off of what people call artificial sugars, some of them actually are naturally based and come off of things like leaves. There's a different monster in my opinion. Okay, so that's why I wanted to cut him off before he went very far, because I wasn't sure if he was going to talk about that or not.
No, that's a good thing to identify, because you do have natural sugars, you also have manufactured sugars, and then you have artificial sweeteners, and you have plant-based calorie-less sweeteners, essentially.
Right.
So we've got some notes pretty much that we're going to kind of go through. But when it comes to an artificial sweetener is a chemical that has been created that has no calorie value. Many of these you'll know as, let me pull this up here. You've got saccharin, which is known as Sweet and Low. That's one of the brands. This is the one that I couldn't pronounce. I might slaughter this. Acylsulfame K, which is one of the brands is known as Sunate. I haven't heard of that one actually.
Okay.
So that's fairly new to me.
I have heard of
aspartame, which everyone talks about, which is you can find that in NutraSweet. And sucralose, which is Splenda, as we've talked about before. So those are artificial sweetener alternatives that are more chemically based than they are natural sugar based. Okay, then you have many different kinds of sugars, and all sugars are a type of carb, and all carbohydrates are broken down into glucose into your when you intake them into your body. They're just different structures of sugars. You have monosaccharides, which are like a single molecule sugar. You have disaccharides, which are a 2 molecule sugar. You have polysaccharides, which are multi-chain. And the more of these molecules that you add to these chains, increase the complexity or simplicity of the carbohydrate. So when you hear the term simple carbs, that's when you're talking actual sugars. Those are your monosaccharides and your disaccharides. When you're talking complex carbs, that's your polysaccharides, and those are longer lasting, more sustainable energy sources. So now that there's kind of that precedent set, there's a few reasons why artificial sweeteners could be argued as less healthy alternative, even though they don't have sugar and they don't have calorie value.
Take the other side of it first. Say why they could be.
Why they could be good.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
I think that's something we should cover first.
Okay, so the reason why we start looking towards artificial sweeteners is because you have more calorie freedom, you don't consume as many sugars, so the idea is that you won't spike your blood sugar as much. We know that sugar has a tendency, can be stored as body fat, and it just causes, spikes and drops in blood sugar, which then affects insulin and your energy throughout the day and can impact mood, those kind of things. So artificial sweeteners like that are in diet sodas or things like vitamin water. Those, not all vitamin water has I think actually they might, but I don't know for sure. Most types of sports drinks that are calorie-less,
they're almost always artificial.
Pretty much, if you're consuming anything that's sweet and claims to have no sugar, it almost always is going to have some type of artificial sweetener in there.
Why is that?
Why is that?
Why is it that they have no calories?
Why is it that an artificial sweetener has no calories?
Yeah.
Why don't you find that out for us?
No, I'm just asking you. Do you not have an answer to that?
Not a direct answer,
okay,
but that I want to cover right now. So, however, in terms of sweetness with artificial sweeteners, they are hundreds of times sweeter than your natural sugar, which does have an impact on your brain interpreting the sweetness, which can. There's some evidence to show that it can still impact things like insulin and insulin sensitivity.
Well, the body reacts to it.
Because your body is anticipating that sugar is about to enter.
Because it feels that sweetness.
Because it detects the sweetness. So there's some research being done on artificial sweeteners and insulin sensitivity. Probably is still inconclusive. Not inconclusive, but further research still needs to be explored.
Which I agree with that. But I'll say this at this point with what we've got information wise. I don't think you need to move it. The reality is, from what we've seen, and Taylor and I probably both 100% agree on this, is that it'll cause insulin resistance. It's because it almost has to, because and granted, like you said, the studies aren't out yet well enough that we can do a partially informed answer, but we can't give it a definitive answer.
Yeah.
And so, but the reality is, according to the evidences that we've seen so far, we're going to take a somewhat.
It may be leaning that way.
It is leaning that way. That's actually, we can say that is provenly leaning that way. It doesn't mean that it's actually right, but if it does raise insulin kicking out with no glucose in correlation, the body's going to react in such a way that it's going to shut down the need for insulin. So it's going to make it so that there's less requirement for it. So artificial sweeteners are going to have to, on a logical sense, cause insulin resistance. It has to, because it's fighting against something that's not there, and so the body's going to have to ignore it. Mm-hmm. It's the only thing it can do, or it's going to make it so it's sick.
Yeah. So on a physiological level, that's kind of what takes place. But you also have to think on a psychological level that when you're looking at using artificial sweeteners as an alternative to either save on calorie intake or food intake, or just keeping your sugar intake lower, which we've talked about, those kind of things, it still is going to have a psychological effect, because you're going to associate sweetness and tastiness and things like that with those types of foods or drink that you're having those artificial sweeteners with. And they're hundreds of times sweeter than your natural sugars. So what's going to happen is people can still develop a dependency or a, craving for sweet foods and sweet types of things, even though they're, trying to moderate their sugar intake, which may lead you to fall victim to consuming more sweets, or just becoming dependent and reliant on these densely packed artificial sweetened foods and drinks, and subjecting yourself to that. Also, one thing to note is that some artificial sweeteners are confirmed as carcinogenic, which a carcinogen is a potential cancer-causing agent. Mm-hmm. So when you're consuming, let's say that you like to have a diet soda drink per day. Maybe you have a sports drink. You do some artificially sweetened amino acids, even though there's good benefits to amino acids, but they're artificially sweetened because most supplements are. and then maybe there's a trace artificial sweetener in some type of food that you're consuming. You're consuming that on a daily basis, these high doses of artificial sweetener chemicals, every day of your life for months, years. You don't know what the long-term impacts of that is going to be. Now, we don't have a whole lot of long-term research to reference to really say what's going to happen, but I like to lean on the safe side to say, you know what, I want to keep as little of that in my body as possible.
Yeah, let's talk about timelines.
You got something pulled
up? I
up?
do have some stuff. So saccharin was actually accidentally found in 1879.
Really? That long ago? I didn't know it was that old.
It was a chemist that was doing some work on some stuff, and he accidentally spilled a compound he was working on his hand. And when he went home and he started to eat, he noticed an intense sweet taste.
Oh, really?
And that's where saccharin comes from.
Oh, that's cool. You learn something every day.
When you talk about aspartame, it was discovered in 1965. So it's been around for quite a while, too. The problem with saccharin, let's start with that, was in the 1970s. I'm lying to you. 1960s, the studies that were conducted on saccharin actually showed cancer in rats. Now, that being said...
But did it control for all type of factors? That's what you got to look at.
It's not even that, because I get where you're coming from with that. But the difference between humans and rats is they're different.
Well, yeah, they're different species.
So, and it's not just that. The makeup is so
that's
dramatically different.
It's
close enough, right? It's close
human
enough.
Trials.
It's close enough that they do a lot of trials on rats because they can actually get a close enough feel for it. But there's a difference between the two.
Well, they can observe a full lifespan too.
That's true too, because you'll get the whole length of it. But they did some trials in the 1970s, 1977 to be exact, that showed that it did not, because of the lower doses, it didn't cause any cancer-related issues in humans. But
yeah,
they
there's just so many different aspects and factors. We really won't know for sure until we can watch an entire
in 2002. So they've been following this for quite a while. I mean, it's been pretty long.
But in humans.
On humans. Oh. They've been watching human stuff since 1977.
Yeah. It'll be interesting when we can see an entire population participate in a study where they're regularly consuming artificial sweeteners and see it across the lifespan. I mean, we won't see that because we'll be dead. But,
I agree with that.
But in the future, someone will be able to know.
We'll know way before that, I'm
more.
certain, though. I'm going to tell you that most of this stuff's going to get banned sooner than later. Saccharin was actually banned in 1977 in Canada.
Oh yes, I have read that.
But aspartame has been shown to be harmless in as small doses in people as well, according to these studies. That being said, I would say that the other studies that I've seen on this, which deal with cancer-related issues with aspartame, because it changes things on a not a molecular level, but on a DNA base, so it is molecular. It actually, they've shown signs that it does affect the DNA, which is ultimately going to become a cancerous thing.
Oh yeah.
Now I'm not reading that in this. That's something I already knew about aspartame. But acyl I can't say it either.
Acyl sulfame.
Yeah, you said it close enough.
That's it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
It was discovered in 1967. So most of these are actually pretty old.
That's interesting.
They most of them have been around. The original drink that was put out with it in it was Pepsi One.
Really?
Yep. So I mean, it has been around for a while. The problem is a lot of these are showing signs of cancer.
Yeah.
They all have tendencies towards cancer, and the reason why, and this is what I was kind of getting to when I asked that question to Taylor earlier that he didn't answer, is they're not food. Okay, these are not foods. They are not additives. They are not anything good to take into your body.
They're not nutrient additives. They're chemical additives.
They're chemical additives, right? So that's why they have no calories, is because the body cannot use them in any way, and I cannot see how that would be a good thing.
Yeah, I do remember reading one study about sucralose as well.
It has 9 calories.
Oh, which one? All of them, or
no.
The acyl
saccharin. Saccharin has 9.
Oh, okay.
9 calories.
So these are they're either no calorie free, or very, very low calorie.
Usually saccharin's actually fairly high calorie, but they don't use it as much.
But anyway, so that's kind of artificial sweeteners for you. And then you've got different kinds of sugars that come from different sources. We can talk about all the different types, and we probably will in a different episode. But
I want to touch on a few things. So here, let's talk about some key ones.
Okay, let me talk about added sugars, and then we'll talk about normal sugars. Is that cool? Yep. So added sugars are going to be things that are hidden. You're not going to know that actually is sugar into your processed foods. There's a laundry list of these. I can't even remember all of them, but your most common ones are things like maltodextrin, malt syrup, fructose, high fructose corn syrup, cane sugar. There's just so many different variations. Anything that says gum, xantha gum, anything that says gum, sugar, cane, ends in OSE, so os, like, sucrose, those kind of things, maltose. Anything, what else am I missing? Anything that ends with syrup. Those are all sugars. It's all just fancy names for sugars. And there's other ones too that don't even sound anything like sugar.
Well, sugars are
added sweetener sugars, but not all of them are artificial.
No, not all of them are artificial.
Dextrose, those kind of things. So those are, if you're reading your food label and you're seeing those types of things pop up, that's it's gonna have at least a notable amount of that in there in the food item itself. So pay attention to that. Those would be your added sugars, and then you're going to have different types of sugars based off of what we talked about, those monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides. There's other types of saccharides, which are your carbohydrates or sugar chains. Glucose, galactose, and fructose all come from monosaccharides. Lactose and maltose come from disaccharides. And starches, cellulose, sucrose, glycogen, and pectin all come from polysaccharides, which are your complex carbohydrates. So you want to lean more towards
poly means many.
Yeah, you want to lean more towards the polysaccharides, or fancy word for complex carbs, things that have less simple structure to them, less processed, whole food carbohydrate sources, those types of things. Because if you're consuming a lot of simple carbs, that's when your sugar count tends to go up. Now, to talk about, in my opinion, what the difference between the two is, here's the thing: you don't want too much of either of them. I can't really say for certain what's going to happen with artificial sweeteners. All we can say is that evidence leans towards saying that they could be cancer-causing agents. If that's the case, I'm just going to minimize my intake of them as much as possible.
Well, and right now it's not all the tests have been on higher doses ideas that would be even potentially riskful that way.
Yeah, and then I do also want to keep my sugar intake low. I tend to lean more towards I'm okay having more natural sugars in organic fruits, coconut water. We've talked a lot of benefits about coconut.
Yep.
If you're sticking with something that is fairly natural, it's going to have a normal, natural amount of sugar that has going to be often attached with fiber that is going to slow its absorption. Don't be boxing and punching at me. Here's the thing, man. This is the thing, is that you can't expect someone to not ever eat sugar.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
And you need to understand where there's better sources of sugar than less harmful sources of sugar.
Yes, but you'll agree with me when I say this. But when you're juicing, and you take out all the fibers, and you start
when you're
drinking,
juicing,
but that's still natural source. I
understand.
That's the only reason why I wanted to. That's where I was struggling with what you were saying.
Okay.
If you're taking apple juice per se,
yeah,
you are taking high doses of sugar, and it is not good for you.
Well, and most juices that you buy are going to have added sugars, which is funny because they don't need it because it's already sweet enough.
I agree with it totally. But let's talk about stuff that's not from concentrates, because concentrates always add sugar. But if you take stuff that's not from concentrates, it is a more pure source, and they almost never add sugars to it.
Yeah,
and
that's how they can market it well and sell it, because people think, oh, it's organic,
it's
so
natural,
it's good.
Right? And my problem with it is when you take out the fibers that you're talking about, because
I agree with that.
Effect. It's worse. It intensifies
because of the concentration.
Because of the concentration levels, right? And that's why I'm like, you're killing me with what you're saying. I just want that as a clarifier because that's true. everything else you're saying is true. I completely agree.
And that would be the same case even with the coconut water. Now, it's actually extracted from the coconut itself. It's not necessarily a concentrate. Some can be. And so your serving amount of sugar is much less than a cup of coconut water is about 10, 11 grams.
I was going to say, too, though, coconuts run more on, even their waters run more on a ketones base than it does on sugars.
You're thinking coconut milk?
I'm talking about both.
Coconut water is mostly sugar.
It has sugar in it. I'm not denying.
I don't even think there's a gram of fat in that.
I'm going to look. And now you've got me intrigued.
But anyway.
Because I don't want to misquote that, because you could be right on that.
But so, yeah, Shane's right. When you're talking about juices, juicing your own fruits and vegetables, or even buying juice, especially juice from concentrate, and even organic juices, they have removed the fiber and the pulp. So that is going to rapidly spike your blood sugar, which is worse than consuming whole fruit sources or actual natural juices like coconut water, where they haven't necessarily tampered with it. And in some cases they have. So
really low, though.
So you need to make sure that you're not counting juice as a fruit source, and you're not necessarily focusing on drinking juices. If you're gonna have sugars, get it from whole fruit, actual food sources, because the fiber will slow down the absorption,
which is the important part of that.
Yeah,
for sure. That's the reason why I have a problem when people want a juice. Yeah. Is because they completely take away the fiber aspects, which is good for you in a big way, because it protects your body. Yes, breaking the sugars down. Yeah. I wanted to voice in, because I'm gonna validate what he said. So there are no fats whatsoever in coconut water. There is sodium and potassium, which is almost the biggest. Well, it's not the biggest, but it is a big chunk of this. And then carbs are below a gram.
Yeah. Well, in what serving size? You're not looking at a cup.
Tablespoon.
Yeah. So in a cup, it's about, I think it's like between 10 and 12 grams of sugar.
That would make sense.
It has a big dose of potassium, a little sodium, but not too much. It's a great electrolyte, partial electrolyte replacement.
It is a good potassium replacer. I wouldn't call it electrolyte, but it was related.
Yeah. One last thing on sugar that I wanted to talk about is how people talk about.
Me. I actually thought it was higher fats than that.
You're thinking coconut milk.
That's probably true.
Yeah, but the high prevalence of high fructose corn syrup, and people are becoming aware of this. Some of these chemical sugars, but especially high fructose corn syrup, that are tampered with in the processing of food. Because
it is a GMO.
It originally, So anyway, your liver can't always process those types of sugars entirely, and it causes your liver to overwork, and some of it inevitably gets stored as fat, and often gets stored as visceral fat, which is around the organs, which is less healthy fat. That is, you want to keep that low. This is the problem with high fructose corn syrup, and people that have high consumptions of that type of sugar tend to have large, guts or stomach issues, and belly fat storage. So that's where that's one of the more talked about, quote unquote bad sugar sources or things like that. But it is in a lot of different foods. And so when you just simply do this, go to the grocery store and look at all your processed foods that you normally buy. If you do still buy processed foods, look at the juices, look at everything that has a label. Look down the ingredient list and look for all those different things. Xantha gum, high fructose corn syrup, different types of syrups, sugars, cane, maltodextrin, all that kind of stuff, the sweeteners, sucralose, all those. Look for that and see how prevalent it is. It's in everything. And so you don't want to be exposing yourself to too much of this at all times. Now, of course, if you're not doing ketogenic and carbohydrates are a part of your normal day, a controlled amount of sugar is tolerable, especially if you're not diabetic or prediabetes or have that in your family, or you're not becoming insulin resistant. Sugar, it's not something that I want to demonize. It's just something that you should watch out for, because anything in excess can be a bad thing. Water in excess can kill you.
Yes, we talked about that too.
Just focus on a condensed amount of your sugar intake. I would honestly lead people in, if I have to make a choice, I would say lead towards a controlled, reasonable amount of natural organic sugar intake through fruits each day, and versus high amounts of artificial sweetener or high amounts of just sugars. That's kind of where I'm going to leave that.
And I want to add a little bit to it, and not take very much time doing it. But let's talk high corn syrups. high fructose, and let's talk sugar. So here's the problems with both of those naturally based sources, okay? I understand that it's GMO based and it's pulled from corn to make it, but the problem with it is its concentration levels, okay? So,
that's a good point.
Sugar, the problem with sugar and that, both of them are based on they both come from a natural source. It may be modified, but it's still technically natural. The problem with them is the concentration makes it extremely, almost to the level of toxic to the body. Sugars come from the majority of the time come from a cane. And the cane, if you were to eat sugar canes, you would still get sugar, but you would have fiber that would absolutely make it so it wouldn't be a problem. The problem is in the concentration level of things like granulated sugars. Okay, that's crazy high. And you talk the same thing with high fructose corn sugar.
Yeah, there's plenty of demonstration videos and documentaries out there about sugar that you can see the comparison of what concentrated tablespoons or teaspoons or whatever of sugar look like in comparison to how much of the plant you would have to eat in order to eat the concentration amount, and it's a pretty ridiculous comparison.
Well, it's an undoable thing. You couldn't, the little amounts of sugar in that you look at that you like put on your cereal, you couldn't almost eat that much in a day if you're trying to get it from a natural
the actual
source.
Cane stalks.
Right, and that's the problem with what we've done in our nutritional aspects in the United States and across the world is we've taken this stuff and we've made it concentrated because we want sweeter and sweeter and sweeter stuff as time goes on, okay? And so they're looking for the sweet spot, which is a higher dose than physically we're supposed to have. Okay, so that's, like I said, I wanted to add that in there really quick. You know, Taylor and I agree on this pretty heavily. It's not something that I think that's necessarily bad for us overall. I think the problem is the dosage levels. And that's why I say over and over and over again, I am a big advocate of the ketogenic diet, but I don't think that's how everybody should live. I don't think, to be honest, I really don't think ketogenic is the way that overall people should stay. But it's, in my opinion, from what I found with the personal experiences and from what I've seen from friends of mine that have done this kind of stuff, a ketogenic diet, you have a much natural reaction with your body, and you're much healthier overall because of how it is. You take out these concentrations that have been falsely created by these industries, forcing it out there, and that's what my problem is with natural stuff.
But you can go ahead.
Let me finish this, and then I'll back out and I'll let you finish this out. But artificial sweeteners is a worse situation because they're taking a chemical base which has no bearing with being in food. It should never have been put in there, and they throw it into food because it heightens the sweet receptors and it makes it so that people want to have it's almost an addictive nature to it. So it pulls people in like crazy. Both of these I think are massive problems. Do I think that they're okay? See, I think he's going to talk about stevia really quick, which is I hope he does, because that's actually one I like. But my whole issue with this is because of what we do to it. The nature of all these things that are being pushed out there to the American and the worldwide populace are causing absolutely nasty health effects. And again, I'm gonna bash IIFYM one more time because of this, because they look at it as being an acceptable thing. I'm going to tell you that it's not. When you take these massive concentrations, you're not living within your macros. You're not doing things like the basis of IIFYM was created. You're not. And so that's the reason why I think the way that it's run is incorrect, okay, if that makes sense. So I thought I better hit that really fast. I probably went longer than I was planning on doing, but I'll let Taylor finish this out and we'll move along.
No, the only thing I was going to say in response to was, though there's benefits to ketogenic diet, we've talked about how it is hard to maintain. Well,
there's more to it too.
And you don't just because you eat carbohydrates doesn't mean you're necessarily eating artificial sweeteners or processed sugars or excess sugar. And you can still eat a diet oriented around whole foods.
And I agree with that.
Incorporating a good amount of carbohydrates. A high ratio of carbohydrates in your diet and still have a controlled sugar intake because of food choices that you choose. So if you're, like I said, if you're choosing healthy carb sources like good starches, tubers, which are root-based vegetables, legumes, which are like bean type of sources.
That even talks about honey, and honey's not a bad source either.
Oh, yeah. That's another type of sugar that you'll find often is honey in foods. But yeah, if you're focusing on good, complex, healthy, whole food sources of carbohydrates, you're going to be really fine.
Usually.
If you're not consuming to excess and things like that. and you can still have organic. I recommend organic, non-GMO, but fresh fruits and vegetables, and you're going to have some sugars in there, but it's going to be associated with fiber, which is going to be more difficult to overdo it on sugar if you're doing that. So that can be definitely accomplished on a carb dominant or a high carb meal plan or a diet, and still keeping sugar controlled. The last thing that I forgot to talk about is, I'm going to touch it briefly. There are also sugar alcohols that are used as sweetener, and a plant-based, healthier sources of types of sweeteners like stevia, which is a plant-based. Now there is a type of stevia that has been altered with that is still not a good source. I just can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I was looking for it. So if you do have a food with stevia in it, then just double check that it do a little research on your own and try to find if it is a healthy source of stevia or not. There's one type of stevia that I can't remember that is potentially not as healthy, but stevia would be a better sweetener alternative. It's personally what sweetens the protein that I currently take, along with some sugar alcohols. Sugar alcohols are like xylitol, erythritol. Let me see if I can pull them up. I think I have them in here. I can't find it on these notes, but essentially, anything ending in OL is often related to a sugar alcohol, and maltitol, those kind of things. So those will, I won't necessarily say definitely lean towards that, but I personally lean towards sugar alcohols and stevia before I lean towards artificial sweeteners like aspartame and sucralose and those kind of things.
I would agree.
And that's just because there's less negative research against those.
Do you want to go where it comes from really fast? Because, like I said, it is a naturally based thing, but I don't want to...
You can go ahead.
Well, I can say where I think it comes from, but I can't verify this because I don't have it in front of me. But my understanding is stevia is actually derived from a leaf.
Yeah, it's definitely plant-based. So it says the plant stevia or stevia Rebaudiana, I think is how it's pronounced, has been used for over 1,500 years by the Guarani peoples of South America, who called it kai, which means hey. I don't know how to pronounce it, but basically their translation means sweet herb. The leaves have been used traditionally for hundreds of years in both Brazil and Paraguay, and they use it to sweeten teas and medicines and things like that. So you're looking at something that is more plant-based, less chemical, less... I'm not sure actually how much process goes into that, but I do remember reading an article about, a credible article about, there's people that have taken stevia and altered it further that has made it more on that. I don't know for sure if it's legitimate or potentially more harmful sweetener type level, but I know that there are still good sources of it. So that can give you some good ideas for using or for finding some sweetness sources in foods that are maybe potentially less harmful for you.
Right. I would lean towards stevia directly, but.
So yeah, that's what I would say. Some small doses of sugar alcohols and stevia versus artificial sweeteners and high doses of sugars, especially in like juices and foods and the processed sugars in your food. So, but yeah, those were the main questions we had for today. And anything else you wanted to add, Shane?
No, we'll just move on.
Okay, awesome. I hope you guys got some good information out of that, and keep sending us questions. We really like helping you guys, and we just love talking about this stuff.
Well, and sometimes your questions make us have to research, which we like.
Yeah, in fact, it keeps us learning as well on topics.
Because we don't want to give you guys false information. So
yeah,
just like the coconut water, we even talked about. I had to look it up to make sure I wasn't right or wrong. So
cool. So until next time, we'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Shane and I hope you learned something new and exciting today about your own health and fitness. Head over to metabolicradio.com. There you'll find our bios and our results-driven programs that are designed to help teach you everything you need to know when it comes to getting real permanent results. You can also sign up for our newsletter to get free weekly updates. To chat with Shane or I, just email us at taylor@metabolicradio.com or shane@metabolicradio.com. We would love to hear from you. You can also join the conversation on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com and search for Metabolic Radio Private Forum. There you can request to join the group. We would love to add you to the conversation and answer your questions on the show. And hey, if you like our podcast, please help us grow our community by leaving us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. We would really appreciate your help. Thanks again so much for all your support and your listenership. Now go out there and spread the good word of fitness.